Trenton, New Jersey, autumn 1956. Beneath the glow of rusted street lamps and behind silk curtains, a Mafia empire quietly unraveled, all because of her, Lucia Moretti. 23 was the perfect Don's wife, elegant, obedient, invisible when necessary. Married off at 19 to Vittorio Vito Moretti, the most feared man in New Jersey. She was raised to serve a dynasty built on blood and silence. But on a rainy Thursday, Lucia did the one thing no woman had ever done. She left him. The Don expected heartbreak. He didn't expect defiance. And he certainly didn't expect her to take secrets with her. As Lucia disappears into the quiet town of Lambertville, strange things begin to happen. A warehouse burns. Her lieutenant vanishes. An envelope arrives each week at the courthouse. No return address, but filled with names. Vito unleashes chaos across the city, convinced she's the one pulling every string. But what no one knows is she's not alone. Lucia has found something or someone far more dangerous than the Don. And this time the war isn't over turf. It's over truth. Because when a woman raised in silence finds her voice, even the devil learns to listen. She walked away from the most powerful man in New Jersey, and he brought the city to its knees to find her. If you love stories of betrayal, power, and a woman who refuses to stay silent, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this divorce didn't end with heartbreak. It started a war. Chapter 1. The Departure. The autumn wind swept through Trenton's streets, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and impending rain. Lucia Moretti stood at the bedroom window of their grand Victorian mansion on Greenwood Avenue, watching the clouds gather over the Delaware River. The heavy drapes framed her slender figure as she clutched a small leather suitcase in her trembling hand. 4 years. 4 years of marriage to Vittorio Vito Moretti, the most feared man in New Jersey. 4 years of perfect smiles at dinner parties, of averting her eyes when business associates came to the house, of pretending not to hear the muffled sounds from the basement. 4 years of silence. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 3. Vito would be at the Club Capri until evening, overseeing the weekly collection from his lieutenants. This was her window. Lucia glanced around the bedroom one last time. The silk sheets, the imported furniture, the closet full of dresses she never chose herself. Everything a prison of luxury. She touched the pearl necklace at her throat. A wedding gift from Vito. With a sharp tug, she broke the strand, letting the pearls scatter across the polished hardwood floor. Downstairs, Mrs. Rossi, the housekeeper, was preparing dinner in the kitchen. The woman had been with the Moretti family for decades, her loyalty unquestionable. But even Mrs. Rossi had her routines. At precisely 3:15, she would step into the pantry to retrieve the ingredients for Vito's favorite ossobuco. As the clock reached 3:14, Lucia descended the staircase, each step deliberate and quiet. She passed the study where Vito conducted his business, the door always locked. Except today. Today the key had been carelessly left in the lock after his early morning meeting with Salvatore Russo, his consigliere. A moment of hesitation. Then Lucia turned the key. The study smelled of cigar smoke and cologne. Vito's desk dominated the room, its surface impeccably organized. Lucia moved quickly, knowing exactly what she was looking for. The bottom right drawer, the one Vito thought she didn't know about. From her dress pocket, she produced a hairpin, bending it just so, and worked at the lock with practiced precision. A skill learned in secret, watching the locksmith who came to fix the bedroom door last winter. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside lay a black ledger, its pages filled with names, dates, amounts. 4 years of listening at doors, of observing from the shadows, had taught Lucia the value of this book. She took it, along with a small stack of photographs tucked beneath. 3 blocks away, a bus to Lambertville would depart at 3:30. Lucia had memorized the schedule, had been slipping away quarters from her housekeeping allowance for months. Enough for a ticket, enough for a room at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house under the name Lucy Morrison. The rain began to fall as Lucia stepped out the back door, cutting through the garden where Mrs. Rossi grew her herbs. No goodbye note. What would be the point? Vito would never understand why she left. Men like him never did. At the garden gate, Lucia paused, looking back at the house. For a moment she saw herself as she had been 4 years ago, 19, naive, a sacrificial offering from her father to secure his gambling debts. The day her father had told her of the arrangement, she'd cried until her eyes swelled shut. Now she felt nothing but a cold resolve. "Goodbye," she whispered to the girl she'd been. The bus station was nearly empty when Lucia arrived, her coat damp from the increasing rainfall. An elderly man dozed on a bench, and a young mother tried to quiet her fussing baby. The ticket counter was staffed by a bored-looking woman with cat-eye glasses who barely glanced at Lucia as she pushed the ticket across the counter. "One way to Lambertville," the woman said flatly. "Yes," Lucia replied, her voice foreign to her own ears. When was the last time she had spoken to someone outside the Moretti household? "One way." As Lucia settled onto the hard bench to wait, the doors to the station swung open. Her heart seized as a familiar figure entered, Tommy Ricci, one of Vito's men. She lowered her head, turning toward the wall, praying he wouldn't notice her. Tommy walked to the counter, leaned in to speak to the woman. Not looking for her, Lucia realized. Just delivering an envelope, the weekly payment to ensure the station employees reported any unusual comings and goings. The very system she was using to escape. When Tommy left, Lucia exhaled, her hands shaking as she clutched her suitcase. The bus pulled in 5 minutes later, its headlights cutting through the rain. As she boarded, the driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, took her ticket. "Running away from something, miss?" he asked quietly, noticing her nervous glance back toward the station. Lucia hesitated. "Starting something new," she said finally. The driver nodded. "Aren't we all?" He closed the doors and the bus pulled away from the station. As Trenton's familiar streets gave way to the open road, Lucia pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. The rain created rivulets that distorted the passing landscape, much like the tears that had once blurred her vision on her wedding day. But she wasn't crying now. For the first time in 4 years, Lucia Moretti was breathing. If this story of a woman finding her courage against impossible odds resonates with you, consider subscribing to join us on this journey through 1950s New Jersey. Each chapter reveals new depths to Lucia's fight for freedom, and your support means everything to our storytelling community. Chapter 2. The discovery Vito Moretti returned to an unusually quiet house at 7:15 p.m. The autumn rain had intensified, drumming against the roof and windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the silence that greeted him. He hung his hat and coat in the front hall closet, smoothed back his salt and pepper hair, and called out for his wife. "Lucia." No answer. The scent of partially prepared dinner wafted from the kitchen, but there was no sound of pots bubbling or Mrs. Rossi's usual humming. Vito frowned, checking his watch. A gold Rolex, a gift from the mayor after a particularly generous campaign contribution. "Mrs. Rossi," he called, his deep voice echoing through the foyer. The housekeeper appeared from the kitchen, wringing her hands in her apron. At 65, Gina Rossi had been with the Moretti family since Vito was a boy. She had watched him rise from a street runner to the most powerful man in Trenton. And in all those years, Vito had never seen her look so afraid. "Mr. Moretti," she began, her Italian accent thickening with anxiety. "The signora, I cannot find her. I went to ask about the wine for dinner, but she was not in her room. I have looked everywhere." Vito's face remained impassive, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. "Perhaps she went shopping. In this rain? And her blue suitcase is missing." "And," Mrs. Rossi hesitated, "and what?" Vito's voice dropped dangerously low. The study door was unlocked. Vito moved with surprising speed for a man of his stature, crossing the foyer in long strides. The study door stood slightly ajar, precisely as Mrs. Rossi had said. He pushed it open, eyes immediately going to his desk. Everything appeared in order, but something felt wrong. He knelt before the bottom right drawer, produced a small key from his vest pocket, and unlocked it. When he saw the empty space where the ledger should have been, his face drained of color. "Get me Salvatore now." While Mrs. Rossi hurried to the telephone, Vito climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The pearls scattered across the floor told him everything he needed to know. He picked one up, rolling it between his fingers. A gift from their wedding day. Pearls for the perfect, obedient wife he thought he had secured. Salvatore Russo arrived within 20 minutes, shaking rain from his umbrella in the foyer. At 58, Sal had been Vito's right-hand man for over 2 decades. Unlike Vito, who preferred tailored suits and a refined appearance that disguised his violent capabilities. Sal looked every bit the enforcer. Broad-shouldered, scarred knuckles, a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. "She's gone," Vito said simply when Sal entered the study. "And she took the book." Sal's bushy eyebrows shot up. "The ledger? Jesus, Vito! How did she even know about it?" Vito slammed his fist against the desk, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Does it matter? She has names, dates, payoffs, everything." He took a deep breath, composing himself. Vito had built his reputation on never losing control. It was why men feared him without him ever having to raise his voice. "She's been planning this. Saving up, watching, waiting." "We'll find her," Sal assured him, already reaching for the telephone. "She's a woman alone. How far could she get?" "She's not stupid, Sal. I never married her for her looks." Vito walked to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "She's smart, observant. She spent 4 years in this house, listening, learning." "You think she went to the feds?" Vito shook his head. "Not yet. She knows better. She's buying time, setting something up." He turned back to Sal. "Get the boys looking in every hotel, boarding house, and bus station within 50 miles. Check her family in Philly." "And Sal," Vito's dark eyes hardened, "when you find her, bring her to me, unharmed." As Sal left to make the calls, Vito remained at the window. Thunder rolled across the sky, illuminating the garden where he and Lucia had walked arm in arm just last Sunday, maintaining the perfect image of marital contentment for the neighbors to see. "Where are you, Lucia?" he whispered to the storm. In Lambertville, 17 miles away, Lucia sat on a narrow bed in a sparsely furnished room at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. The rain beat against the single window, and a draft crept in around the sill. Nothing like the luxury she had left behind, but the very plainness of the room felt like freedom. On the small desk sat the ledger, open to pages detailing payoffs to judges, police officials, and city council members. Next to it lay the photographs, evidence of meetings between Vito and men whose public personas would be destroyed by the association. A knock at the door made Lucia jump. "Mrs. Morrison?" It was Mrs. Peterson, a widow in her 60s who ran the boarding house with firm efficiency. "There's a telephone call for you. A Mr. Clark." Lucia's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you. I'll be right down." She quickly closed the ledger, sliding it and the photographs under the thin mattress before following Mrs. Peterson down the creaking stairs to the telephone in the hallway. "James," she said quietly into the receiver, "I got your message." The voice on the other end was measured, professional. "Are you safe?" "For now. I have what you asked for." "Good, stay put. I'll come to you tomorrow. The fewer people who see us together, the better." "He'll be looking for me," Lucia said, glancing nervously at Mrs. Peterson, who pretended not to listen from the adjacent parlor. "Let him look. By this time tomorrow, Vito Moretti will have bigger problems than a runaway wife." After hanging up, Lucia returned to her room, double-checking that the ledger remained securely hidden. She crossed to the window, drawing the thin curtains against the night. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a sound like Vito's voice when he was displeased. She shivered, rubbing her arms. 4 years of playing the perfect wife, of being invisible, had prepared her for this moment. Vito had never believed she was paying attention, never thought she was anything more than a pretty decoration for his arm. It was the mistake that would ruin him. Lucia lay down on the bed, fully clothed, too tense to consider changing into her nightgown. Sleep would not come easily tonight, but that was all right. She had been living in a waking nightmare for 4 years. One more sleepless night was a small price to pay for freedom. As rain continued to batter the window, Lucia closed her eyes, picturing the future that awaited her if James Clark kept his promise. A new name, a new city, a chance to start again, far from the long reach of Vittorio Moretti. Chapter 3. The Pursuit by Morning. Vito had assembled his network across Trenton and beyond. Men in suits and fedoras fanned out across the city, checking hotels, questioning bus drivers, showing Lucia's photograph with discreet yet unmistakable urgency. The rain had stopped, giving way to a crisp autumn day with a pale blue sky that belied the tension gripping the city. At the Trenton bus station, Tommy Ricci leaned against the ticket counter, sliding a folded $50 bill toward the woman with cat-eye glasses. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. A janitor pushed a broom in the far corner, pretending not to notice the exchange. "You sure she didn't say where she was headed?" Tommy asked, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. He'd removed his hat, revealing neatly combed dark hair with a touch of pomade that caught the light. The woman pocketed the money with practiced ease, her red-painted fingernails drumming lightly on the counter. "Like I told you, I sell hundreds of tickets. I don't remember every face." Her voice carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much of life pass through her station. Tommy sighed, adjusting his tie. At 32, he was the youngest of Vito's lieutenants, ambitious and eager to prove himself. Finding the boss's wife would earn him serious credit, the kind of credit that led to bigger responsibilities, more money, respect. He leaned in closer, the scent of his aftershave mingling with the smell of floor polish and cigarette smoke that permeated the station. "Try again," he said, sliding another 50 across the counter. Young woman, dark hair, expensive coat, but trying not to look it. "Yesterday afternoon." The ticket woman's eyes narrowed slightly as she took the second bill, folding it precisely before it disappeared into her pocket. Her gaze darted briefly to the clock above the departures board. Almost time for her break. There might have been someone like that. Kept to herself. Bought a one-way. To where? Tommy pressed, his fingers still resting on the counter. A gold signet ring catching the light. Lambertville. Tommy smiled, tipped his hat and was out the door before the woman could say another word. Outside, the morning sun hit his face as he descended the station steps. He pulled a pack of Lucky Strikes from his jacket pocket, lighting one with a silver Zippo engraved with his initials, a gift from Vito after a particularly profitable month. The smoke filled his lungs as he spotted Frankie waiting in the car, engine idling. "Got her," Tommy announced as he slid into the passenger seat. "Lambertville. It's not far." "The boss'll be pleased," Frankie replied, pulling the Buick away from the curb. At 47, Francesco Frankie Benedetto had been with Vito since the early days, his weathered face testament to decades of loyalty. "He's going crazy at the house. Broke a vase this morning. Imported from Italy, too." Tommy chuckled, tapping ash out the window. "Can you blame him?" His wife walks out, takes his private book. I never understood why he married her in the first place. Too educated, that one. Always watching, always listening. Frankie's eyes remained fixed on the road as he navigated through Trenton's morning traffic. The boss married her because she was smart. Said he needed someone who could handle the society folks, be the perfect hostess, someone who could learn. He paused at a red light, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. Guess she learned too well. Meanwhile, in a modest office above a hardware store in downtown Trenton, District Attorney James Clark reviewed his notes from the previous day's telephone call. At 43, Clark had spent his career building cases against men like Vito Moretti, only to watch them crumble when witnesses disappeared or juries were tampered with. The morning light filtered through blinds that needed dusting, illuminating the piles of case files on his desk. His office was a study in functional minimalism, law books lining the shelves, a coffee pot in the corner perpetually half full, a worn leather chair that had seen better days. On the wall hung his law degree from Rutgers and a single photograph of his late wife, Catherine, who had succumbed to polio 5 years earlier. Since then, Clark had thrown himself into his work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. The intercom on his desk buzzed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Mr. Clark, there's a Detective Miller here to see you." "Send him in," Clark replied, quickly tucking his notes into a drawer beneath a stack of innocuous paperwork. Detective Robert Miller entered, removing his hat as he closed the door behind him. A veteran of the Trenton Police Department, Miller was one of the few officers Clark trusted completely. At 50, his once dark hair had faded to steel gray, and decades of policing had etched permanent lines around his eyes. His suit was rumpled, his tie askew. "You look like hell, Bob," Clark observed as Miller took the seat opposite him. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, offering one to Miller, who accepted with a grateful nod. "Been a long night," Miller said after lighting up, the smoke curling between them. "Moretti's got his people turning the city inside out looking for his wife." He glanced at the closed door, then lowered his voice despite their privacy. "Word is she took something. Something important." Clark's expression remained neutral as he leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking in protest. "Is that so?" "Jim," Miller said, the familiarity of his tone indicating years of friendship. Tell me you're not involved in this. Moretti's dangerous enough when he's happy. If someone's helping his wife—" He let the sentence hang, its implications clear in the dust-filled sunlight between them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Clark replied evenly, tapping ash into a glass tray on his desk. "But hypothetically, if someone had evidence that could finally put Vittorio Moretti away, wouldn't that be worth a certain amount of risk?" Miller ran a hand over his face, the stubble of a day-old beard scratching audibly in the quiet office. His bloodshot eyes spoke of a sleepless night. "Jesus, Jim, you're playing with fire. Sometimes that's the only way to burn down a house of cards." Clark stood, signaling the end of the conversation. He straightened his tie, checking his watch. "I have to be in court this afternoon. Walk with me." As they exited the building, neither man noticed the sedan parked across the street, nor its driver watching them through the rearview mirror. The man in the car made a note in a small book before starting the engine. In Lambertville, Lucia woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her boarding house room. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, panic gripped her. The narrow bed, the faded floral wallpaper, the creak of the radiator in the corner, all so different from the opulence she had left behind. Then reality returned. She had left Vito. She was free, almost. She sat up, running a hand through her dark hair, still pinned up from the previous day. Her neck ached from tension and her mouth felt dry. The distant sound of a radio drifted up from downstairs, Perry Como singing. Round and round, the cheerful melody at odds with the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She washed and dressed quickly in the small basin in the corner, the cold water a shock against her skin. She selected the plainest of the 3 dresses she had brought, a navy blue cotton with modest buttons up the front. Nothing that would draw attention. Today she would meet with James Clark, hand over the evidence, and set in motion the plan they had been developing through cautious telephone calls and coded messages for the past 6 months. The ledger and photographs remained hidden beneath the thin mattress. She checked them briefly, running her fingers over the leather cover of the book that contained enough information to destroy Vito's empire. Names, dates, amounts, meticulously recorded in his neat handwriting. Vito had always been precise in his business dealings, a quality she had once admired. Now that precision would be his undoing. Downstairs, Mrs. Peterson was serving breakfast to the other boarders in a dining room that smelled of bacon and coffee. The floorboards creaked under Lucia's sensible shoes as she entered. A traveling salesman sat reading a newspaper, his sample case propped against the table leg. An elderly couple occupied the far end of the table, speaking in hushed tones over their toast and eggs. Lucia took a seat at the far end of the table, keeping her head down as she accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Peterson. The china was chipped at the rim, the coffee strong and bitter, nothing like the imported blend Vito favored. "Sleep well, Mrs. Morrison?" Mrs. Peterson asked, setting a plate of scrambled eggs before her. The landlady's face was kind but curious, her eyes lingering a moment too long on Lucia's face. In a small town like Lambertville, newcomers were always a subject of interest. "Yes, thank you," Lucia lied, forcing a smile. She picked up her fork, though her appetite had vanished the moment she'd entered the crowded room. Every stranger now represented potential danger, every casual glance a possible recognition. The elderly woman across the table looked up from her newspaper, spectacles perched on her nose. "Terrible business in Trenton," she commented to no one in particular, her voice carrying the slight tremor of age. "Says here there was a fire at a warehouse last night. Police suspect arson." Lucia's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. A warehouse fire. One of Vito's properties, no doubt. A warning to someone, or perhaps a distraction. Vito always thought 3 moves ahead. Like the chess games he sometimes played with Salvatore on Sunday afternoons, while she served drinks and pretended not to listen to their conversation. "Shame," the salesman agreed without much interest. His attention focused on the financial section. "Pass the salt, would you?" The breakfast conversation continued around her, but Lucia barely heard it. Her thoughts were on the meeting ahead, on the ledger hidden beneath her mattress, on the narrow window of opportunity, closing with each passing hour. Through the lace curtains, she noticed the street coming to life, a milkman making deliveries, children walking to school with lunch pails swinging from their hands. Women sweeping front steps, ordinary life continuing in its predictable rhythm, oblivious to her inner turmoil. How strange to be sitting here, anonymous among them, when just yesterday she had been Mrs. Lucia Moretti, a woman other wives regarded with a mixture of envy and pity. A knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts, the sound echoing through the dining room. Through the lace curtains, Lucia could see Mrs. Peterson answering the door, speaking with someone on the porch. A man in a hat, his back to the window. Something in his posture, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his hat sent a chill through her. "Mrs. Morrison?" Mrs. Peterson called, turning toward the dining room. "There's a gentleman here asking for you. Says he's your cousin from Trenton." Lucia's blood ran cold, her fork clattering against her plate. She had no cousins. The back of her neck prickled with awareness. Vito's men had found her, less than 24 hours after she'd fled. How had someone at the bus station remembered her? Had she been followed without realizing? "Mrs. Morrison?" Mrs. Peterson repeated, a note of confusion in her voice. The other boarders were looking at her now, curious about the new guest who had a visitor so early in the morning. Lucia rose from the table, her mind racing through limited options. There would be a back door through the kitchen. If she could just reach it. "Please tell him I'll be right there," she called, gathering her purse as casually as she could manage. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was certain the others must hear it. "I need to fetch something from my room first." She maintained a measured pace as she climbed the stairs, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Behind her, she could hear Mrs. Peterson inviting the man to wait in the parlor, offering him coffee. The man's voice responded, Tommy Ricci's voice, she realized with a jolt. Not Vito himself, but close enough. Tommy had been with Vito for years, his boyish face belying a reputation for efficiency that made him valuable to her husband. Lucia's hands shook as she retrieved the ledger and photographs from under the mattress, stuffing them into her purse. The leather-bound book barely fit, making the purse bulge awkwardly. She glanced around the room. The small suitcase would slow her down. Better to leave it. She could replace clothes, toiletries. The evidence was irreplaceable. The window, it opened onto a small roof over the kitchen addition, from which she could perhaps reach the oak tree in the side yard. Lucia pushed up the sash, wincing at the loud creak of the old wood. Cool autumn air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. She could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street, the distant whistle of a train. She climbed out onto the sloped roof, her sensible shoes struggling for purchase on the shingles. The purse weighed heavily on her shoulder as she edged toward the oak tree, keeping low to avoid being seen from the street. Inside, she could hear footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. A man's tread. "Mrs. Morrison?" It wasn't Mrs. Peterson's voice this time, but Tommy Ricci's, the false politeness in his tone chilling. "The boss would like a word with you." Lucia reached for a branch of the oak tree, stretching her arm until her shoulder ached. Her fingers brushed the rough bark once, twice, then finally grasped it. With a deep breath, she swung herself from the roof to the tree, scraping her palms but managing to hold on. The branch bobbed under her weight, leaves rustling. She heard the window above slam open further, followed by Tommy's curse. "She's out the window!" "Check the yard." More voices from inside the house now. Mrs. Peterson's confused questions. Tommy barking orders to someone else. Lucia hadn't realized he'd brought backup. Of course he had. Vito would have sent at least 2 men, probably more watching the streets. Feet on solid ground, Lucia hitched up her skirt and ran. Past Mrs. Peterson's prize rose bushes, their late blooms heavy with morning dew. Through the gate in the white picket fence, the latch sticking momentarily before giving way. Onto the quiet Lambertville street, where a paperboy on a bicycle swerved to avoid her. Behind her, she could hear Tommy shouting for someone to start the car. The slam of doors, the roar of an engine. Lucia ran without looking back, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The district attorney's office was 10 blocks away, in the heart of Lambertville's small downtown. If she could reach it, she might still have a chance. She cut through an alley between a bakery and a hardware store, the smell of fresh bread incongruously comforting amid her terror. A delivery truck blocked the far end, forcing her to squeeze between it and the brick wall, the rough surface snagging her dress. She emerged onto Bridge Street, its sidewalks busy with morning shoppers and businessmen heading to work. Lucia forced herself to slow to a walk, trying to blend in despite her dishevelment. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her purse, and adopted what she hoped was a purposeful stride. The district attorney's office was just 5 blocks now, past the pharmacy, the Five and Dime, the public library with its stone lions standing guard. She glanced back, spotting Tommy's dark suit moving through the crowd a block behind. He hadn't seen her yet, his gaze scanning the pedestrians. She ducked into the Five and Dime, moving quickly through the aisles of household goods and candy displays. The shop was crowded enough to provide cover, but not so busy that she couldn't maneuver. She exited through the side door, emerging onto a smaller residential street. As she rounded the corner onto Union Street, a black sedan screeched to a halt beside her. The passenger door flew open. Lucia froze, ready to bolt in the opposite direction, when she recognized the driver, James Clark. "Get in," he commanded, his voice urgent. His normally immaculate appearance was disrupted, tie loosened, hair slightly mussed, eyes wide with adrenaline. Lucia hesitated for only a second before diving into the car, slamming the door as Clark accelerated away from the curb. In the side mirror, she caught a glimpse of Tommy Ricci emerging from an alley onto Union Street, his face contorted with anger as he spotted the departing sedan. "They found me," she gasped, clutching her purse to her chest, feeling the hard outline of the ledger pressed against her ribs. How did they find me so quickly? Clark kept his eyes on the road, expertly navigating through Lambertville's narrow streets. The car smelled of leather and his sandalwood aftershave, familiar from their clandestine meetings over the past months. Moretti has eyes everywhere, bus stations, hotels, police departments, but we prepared for this. He glanced at her purse, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You have it." Lucia nodded, still catching her breath. Her heart rate was beginning to slow, though the adrenaline left her feeling shaky. Everything. The ledger, the photographs. 4 years' worth of evidence. Good girl. Clark's expression softened momentarily, a flash of something more personal than professional concern crossing his features. They had maintained a strictly business relationship throughout their conspiracy against Vito, but there had been moments, lingering glances, hands touching as they exchanged documents, that hinted at possibilities. "I know this isn't easy, but what you're doing, it's brave. You're saving this city from a monster." They drove in tense silence for several minutes, the car's engine a comforting rumble beneath them. Through the windows, Lucia watched Lambertville's quaint downtown, giving way to residential neighborhoods, then to the more rural outskirts. She realized they were heading not toward the district attorney's office, but toward the Delaware River and the bridge to Pennsylvania. "Where are we going?" she asked, noticing the change in direction. She sat up straighter, one hand still protectively covering her purse. "Change of plans." Clark checked the rearview mirror, his jaw tight with tension. "Moretti will have men watching the office. We're meeting the federal agents in New Hope. They'll take you and the evidence to Philadelphia, where you'll be safe until the grand jury convenes." The mention of federal agents was new. "You didn't say anything about the FBI before," Lucia said, a note of suspicion creeping into her voice. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Clark sighed, briefly taking his eyes off the road to meet her gaze. "I've been building this case in secret for months. Vito has informants in my office in the Trenton PD. I couldn't risk word getting back to him." He returned his attention to driving as they approached the bridge spanning the Delaware River. "Agent Fisher is a good man. He's been after Vito and others like him for years." As they crossed the bridge, Lucia gazed at the water below, swollen from the previous night's rain, the boundary between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, between her past and her future. The river flowed relentlessly southward, unconcerned with the human dramas playing out above it. "There's no going back now," she whispered, more to herself than to Clark. The morning sun caught the ripples in the water, transforming them into flashes of gold and silver. "There never was," he replied, "not from the moment you decided to leave him." The sedan crossed the bridge, leaving New Jersey behind. For the first time since she'd walked out of the Moretti mansion, Lucia allowed herself to believe that escape might actually be possible. She watched the Welcome to Pennsylvania sign flash past, and with it, felt a weight begin to lift from her shoulders. New Hope appeared ahead, its picturesque streets lined with colonial-era buildings and small shops catering to weekend tourists from Philadelphia. Clark drove through the center of town, then turned onto a less-traveled road leading toward a cluster of old stone houses set back from the street. He pulled into the driveway of the last house, its windows dark, its garden overgrown. "This, is it?" Lucia asked, eyeing the seemingly abandoned property with misgiving. "Safe house," Clark explained, turning off the engine. "Looks vacant on purpose. Agent Fisher is inside." As if on cue, the front door opened, and a man in a gray suit stepped onto the porch. Tall and lean, with the military posture common to federal agents. He surveyed their car before giving a small nod. "That's our signal," Clark said, opening his door. "Let's go. From here, you'll be under federal protection." Lucia clutched her purse tight against her side as she followed Clark up the stone path to the house. With each step, the distance between her and Vito grew. With each breath of the crisp autumn air, the scent of freedom grew stronger. Behind them, unnoticed, a car slowed on the road, then continued past the house. Inside, a man picked up a radio handset and spoke 3 words. "Found her. New hope." The chess game continued. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The federal safe house in Philadelphia was a brownstone on a quiet residential street, indistinguishable from its neighbors. Inside, however, it bustled with activity as agents pored over the contents of Vito Moretti's ledger, photographing each page and cross-referencing names with existing files. Lucia sat at a kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold before her as she answered an endless stream of questions. "And the judge's name appears on page 37? Agent Howard Fisher asked, making another notation in his already crowded notebook. At 45, Fisher had spent his entire career with the Bureau, the last 5 years focused exclusively on organized crime in the Mid-Atlantic region. "Yes," Lucia confirmed, her voice growing hoarse after hours of interrogation. Judge Holloway received monthly payments, $500, in exchange for favorable rulings. The dates are there alongside the case numbers. Fisher nodded appreciatively. "Mrs. Moretti, I can't overstate the value of what you've provided. We've been trying to build a case against your husband for years." "He's not my husband," Lucia corrected him sharply. "Not anymore." "Legally, he still is," James Clark interjected from his position by the window, where he'd been watching the street with nervous attention. "The divorce papers haven't been filed yet." Lucia's shoulders slumped slightly at this reminder. Of course, another tie to Vito that would need to be severed, but that would mean appearing in court, being visible, vulnerable. "What happens now?" she asked, directing her question to Fisher rather than Clark. "Now we prepare for the grand jury," Fisher explained. "With your testimony and this evidence, we'll secure indictments against Moretti and his entire operation, judges, police, city officials, everyone who helped him control Trenton." "And Lucia," Clark pressed, "what about her protection?" Fisher's expression grew serious. "We'll keep Mrs. Moretti here until the indictments are issued. After that, we can discuss the witness protection program." He turned back to Lucia. "You understand what that means? A new identity, a new location. You can never contact anyone from your past again." Lucia nodded slowly. "I understood that from the beginning. There's no one I need to contact anyway." Her family had essentially sold her to Vito to cover her father's gambling debts. Her former friends had dropped away after the marriage, intimidated by Vito's reputation. She was already a ghost in her own life. A commotion at the front of the house interrupted them. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. Agent Fisher stood, hand moving instinctively toward his holstered weapon. Another agent appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression grave. "Sir, there's been an incident in Trenton. Lieutenant Martinez from Moretti's crew was found in the Delaware River," Fisher cursed under his breath. "Dead?" "Yes, sir. And there's more. The Trenton courthouse received an unmarked envelope this morning containing photographs of Judge Holloway meeting with Moretti." Clark moved away from the window. "That's impossible. The photographs are here with the ledger." "Not all of them," Lucia said quietly. All eyes in the room turned to her. "I kept duplicates, insurance, in case something happened to me before I could reach you. I mailed one set to the courthouse yesterday before leaving Trenton." Fisher looked at her with newfound respect. "Smart move." Dangerous move, Clark countered, his face flushing with anger. You should have told me. This accelerates everything. Moretti will know we're building a case. He already knew that the moment I left with his ledger, Lucia replied, a new confidence in her voice. I'm simply ensuring he can't bury this, no matter what happens to us. The telephone rang, cutting through the tension. Fisher answered it, his expression darkening as he listened to the caller. When? He demanded. How many? A pause. Get everyone out, now. He hung up, turning to face the room. Moretti's men have been spotted in the neighborhood. 3 cars, at least 8 men. Someone talked. His eyes flicked briefly to Clark, who blanched at the implication. We need to move Mrs. Moretti, Fisher ordered, already gathering the ledger and photographs. The backup location in South Philly. Johnson, Thomas, you take the evidence. Davis, you and I will escort Mrs. Moretti. I'm coming too, Clark insisted. Fisher fixed him with a hard stare. No, you're not. In fact, you're staying right here to explain how Moretti's men found this address less than 24 hours after we set up. You think Clark began. Indignant. I think someone compromised this operation, Fisher cut him off. And until I know who, you're not getting anywhere near our witness. As the agents hurried to prepare for departure, Lucia found herself alone with Clark for a moment in the kitchen. His earlier confidence had crumbled, replaced by a nervous energy that set her on edge. James, she said softly, studying his face. Is there something you're not telling me? Clark wouldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated, Lucia. The politics in Trenton, the relationships between law enforcement and other interests. Sometimes lines get blurred. A cold feeling settled in Lucia's stomach. You're on his payroll, she realized, the truth suddenly crystallizing. All this time you've been working for Vito. No, Clark protested too forcefully. Not exactly. I've had to make certain accommodations over the years, arrangements that benefited my career. But I want Moretti taken down as much as you do. Then why did his men find us? Lucia demanded, backing away from him. Clark ran a hand through his hair. I made a call. I thought if I gave Vito something small, not you, never you, just information about one of his lieutenants, he might focus his attention elsewhere. Give us breathing room. Lucia felt sick. She had trusted Clark, had put her life in his hands, and all along he'd been playing both sides. Mrs. Moretti? We're ready, Agent Fisher called from the hallway. She turned away from Clark without another word, following Fisher toward the back door, where a nondescript sedan waited in the alley. As she slid into the back seat, she caught a glimpse of Clark watching from the kitchen window, his face a mask of regret. The car pulled away, merging into Philadelphia's midday traffic. In the front passenger seat, Agent Davis maintained a vigilant watch on the surrounding vehicles. We're being followed, he announced after several blocks. Black Cadillac, 2 cars back. Fisher checked the rearview mirror. I see it. Hold on. He executed a sharp right turn, then an immediate left, weaving through side streets with practiced ease. The Cadillac stayed with them, drawing closer. There's another one, Davis warned, spotting a second black car approaching from a cross street. Fisher pressed the accelerator, the sedan leaping forward. Change of plans. We can't risk the safe house. We're heading to the Federal Building downtown. Lucia gripped the door handle as the car swerved around a delivery truck. The Cadillac behind them had closed the distance, close enough now that she could see the silhouettes of men in fedoras through the windshield. The second car appeared alongside them, trying to force them toward the curb. Fisher swerved away, narrowly missing an oncoming streetcar. Get down, he shouted as the window next to Lucia shattered. She ducked below the seat line, glass raining down on her back. Davis had drawn his weapon, returning fire through his open window. Almost there, Fisher assured her, taking another sharp turn. The Federal Building is 2 blocks ahead. The distinctive limestone facade of the Federal Building appeared ahead, its American flag snapping in the autumn breeze. As they approached, Fisher reached for the radio, calling ahead to alert security. Federal agents approaching east entrance with protected witness. 2 hostile vehicles in pursuit. Request immediate assistance. The sedan screeched to a halt at the building's side entrance. Armed guards emerged, weapons drawn. Go, Fisher commanded, turning in his seat to face Lucia. Run for the entrance. Don't stop for anything. Lucia didn't hesitate. She flung open the car door and sprinted toward the steps, hearing shouts and the squeal of tires behind her. The guards moved to intercept the pursuing vehicles as Fisher and Davis provided covering fire. The heavy doors of the federal building swung open as she approached. More agents appeared, ushering her inside and immediately closing ranks behind her. The sounds of the confrontation outside became muffled as the doors swung shut. Safe for now, Lucia was led through security checkpoints to an elevator, which ascended to the 5th floor. There, in a conference room with views overlooking the city, she found Agent Fisher's superior, Deputy Director Wilson, waiting with several other agents. Mrs. Moretti, Wilson greeted her, his silver hair and commanding presence giving him an air of authority. "I understand we've had some complications." "You could say that," Lucia replied, still catching her breath. "District Attorney Clark has been compromised. He's been feeding information to my husband." Wilson nodded grimly. Agent Fisher suspected as much. "Rest assured we're dealing with Mr. Clark." He gestured for her to take a seat at the conference table. "In light of these developments, we need to accelerate our timeline. The grand jury will be convened tomorrow morning. Are you prepared to testify?" Lucia thought of the past 24 hours, her escape from the mansion, the chase through Lambertville, the betrayal by Clark, and now the violent pursuit through Philadelphia's streets. All of it leading to this moment, this decision. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready to tell them everything." Back in Trenton, Vito Moretti sat in his study, the room dark except for a single desk lamp. The telephone before him rang and he answered it on the first ring. "Yes?" "We lost her," came the voice on the other end. "She made it to the federal building." Vito's expression remained impassive, though his grip on the receiver tightened. "And Clark?" "The feds have him. They know he was playing both sides." "Unfortunate." Vito leaned back in his chair. "What about the evidence?" "She had it with her. But there's more. She sent copies to the courthouse. Judge Holloway is already asking questions." Vito was silent for a long moment. "I underestimated her," he said finally. "She was always watching, always learning. I thought that made her a good wife. I didn't realize it made her dangerous. What do we do now, boss?" Vito stood, moving to the window where he could see the lights of Trenton spread before him, like a kingdom he had ruled for decades. "We prepare. Some of our friends will need to disappear for a while. Others will need reminding where their loyalties lie. And Mrs. Moretti?" Vito's reflection in the glass stared back at him, older and more tired than he cared to admit. "My wife has made her choice. Now she'll have to live with it." He hung up the phone and returned to his desk, opening a drawer to retrieve a small wooden box. Inside lay a string of pearls, the ones Lucia had scattered across their bedroom floor when she left. Vito had personally collected each one, a task that had taken hours on his hands and knees. He closed the box, decision made. Lucia may have won this round, but the game was far from over. Outside the window of the federal building, the Philadelphia skyline stretched toward a sky turning amber with the approach of sunset. Somewhere out there, Vito was still searching for her, still pulling strings, still believing he could control the outcome, as he had controlled everything else in his life. But for the first time, Lucia held the power. And tomorrow she would use it. Chapter 5. The Reckoning, the Ophi. Grand jury room in the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse was smaller than Lucia had imagined. An intimate space with wooden paneling and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in a slightly sickly pallor. 18 jurors faced her, ordinary citizens called to evaluate extraordinary crimes. Behind them sat Deputy Director Wilson and Agent Fisher, their expressions carefully neutral. Lucia smoothed the skirt of her borrowed navy suit, a loaned garment from a female agent, slightly too large at the shoulders but otherwise presentable. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, her makeup minimal. She wanted to appear honest, reliable, not Vito Moretti's glamorous wife, but a credible witness to years of corruption and crime. "Please state your name for the record," the federal prosecutor prompted. "Lucia Moretti," she replied, her voice steadier than she had expected. 4 years of practice at dinner parties, never showing fear, never revealing weakness. Chapter 5. The Reckoning continued. "Lucia Moretti," she replied, her voice steadier than she had expected. 4 years of practice at dinner parties, never showing fear, never revealing weakness, now served her well as she faced 18 strangers who would determine her husband's fate. And you are the wife of Vittorio Moretti of Trenton, New Jersey. The prosecutor continued. Yes. Mrs. Moretti, please tell the jury how you came to possess the evidence presented today. Lucia took a deep breath. My husband maintained a private study in our home on Greenwood Avenue. The room was always locked, but on the day I left, October 15th, the key had been left in the door. Inside, I found a locked drawer in his desk. Over the years, I had learned certain skills. I opened it and discovered the ledger and photographs. And why did you take these items? I knew what they were, Lucia explained. After 4 years of living in that house, of overhearing conversations, of watching men come and go at strange hours, I understood that these documents contained evidence of my husband's criminal activities. The questions continued for hours. Lucia identified photographs, explained entries in the ledger, connected names to positions of power in Trenton. She detailed the network of corruption that Vito had built. Judges who dismissed cases, police officers who looked the other way, city officials who approved permits and contracts. Mrs. Moretti, the prosecutor asked as the testimony neared its conclusion, did you ever participate in your husband's criminal activities? Lucia hesitated, aware of the legal implications. I attended social functions where these men were present. I served drinks to corrupted officials in my home. I lived a life of luxury purchased with illegal gains. She met the prosecutor's gaze directly. I was complicit in my silence. A murmur ran through the jury box. But you're breaking that silence now, the prosecutor noted. Why? Lucia thought of all the rehearsed answers she could give, civic duty, moral awakening, desire for justice. But in this moment, only the unvarnished truth would suffice because I couldn't breathe, she said simply. Every day in that house I was suffocating. Every smile, every perfect dinner, every time I pretended not to hear what was happening in the basement, I lost a piece of myself. She looked down at her hands, surprised to find them steady. I left to save my life. The evidence, that was to ensure Vito couldn't drag me back. When the grand jury session ended, the indictments came swiftly, not just for Vito, but for 3 judges, the police commissioner, 2 city council members and 11 others. Headlines across the Northeast screamed of the Moretti crime network and the fall of Trenton's shadow government. But none mentioned the woman whose testimony had made it possible. 2 days later, Lucia sat in another nondescript room, this time in the U.S. Marshal's office. Across the desk, Marshal Robert Tanner slid a manila envelope toward her. Your new identity, he explained. Birth certificate, social security card, driver's license. The works. Lucia opened the envelope, examining the unfamiliar name on the documents. Elizabeth Collins, she read aloud, testing the sound of it. You'll be relocated to Seattle, Tanner continued. We've arranged an apartment and a job as a secretary in a law firm. It's a fresh start, Mrs. Moretti. A complete break from your past. And Vito? Arraignment is tomorrow. Given the evidence and the additional witnesses who've come forward since the indictments, the prosecutor expects he'll be in prison for the rest of his life. Lucia nodded, a strange mixture of relief and emptiness washing over her. The goal she had worked toward for so long was finally accomplished, yet the future stretched before her as a great unknown. There's something else, Tanner said, reaching into his desk drawer. This arrived for you. It's been thoroughly checked. No tracking devices, nothing dangerous. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. No return address, just her name, her real name, written in a familiar, elegant script, may I? She asked. Tanner nodded, stepping out of the office to give her privacy. Lucia carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small wooden box she recognized immediately, a jewelry box from Vito's desk, one she had admired but never been allowed to touch. She opened it with trepidation. Inside lay her pearl necklace, the one she had broken and scattered across the bedroom floor the day she left. Each pearl had been recovered, the strand restrung. Nestled beside it was a folded note. With trembling fingers, Lucia opened it. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for, Vito had written. I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again. The words weren't threatening. There was even a hint of grudging respect in them. But they were a reminder that even from a cell, Vittorio Moretti would never truly surrender. Lucia closed the box, slipping it and the note back into the brown wrapping paper. Then she dropped the package into the metal wastebasket beside the desk. I'm ready, she called to Marshal Tanner. gathering her new identity in her hands. As they walked toward the car that would take her to the airport, a light rain began to fall, not unlike the rain on the day she had fled Trenton. But this time Lucia didn't hurry or hunch her shoulders against it. Instead, she turned her face upward, letting the cool drops wash over her like a baptism. In Seattle it rained often, she had heard. Elizabeth Collins would need to get used to it. The black sedan pulled away from the curb, carrying Lucia Moretti away from her past for the final time. In the rearview mirror, Philadelphia receded, then disappeared altogether as they rounded a bend in the road. Ahead lay the airport, the flight to Seattle, the new name and new life waiting to be claimed. Lucia, soon to be Elizabeth, watched the raindrops trace patterns on the car window, creating ever-changing pathways down the glass. Like choices, she thought. Like possibilities. For the first time in years, the possibilities were hers alone. If this story of courage, identity, and the price of freedom touched something in you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing these deeply human narratives to life. Stories that remind us of the extraordinary strength found in ordinary people facing impossible choices. Join our storytelling community as we explore the complex tapestry of human experience through the characters and moments that define us all.